Finish him! Liu Kang wins. Flawless victory fatality.
What is happening, guys? Concrete Breakdowns here, coming at you with a proper deathmatch today. You might be familiar with the concept. Two fighters are put in a fictional fight and I go over their habits and attributes and make a case for who is going to win in the end. Please remember to like, subscribe and comment to help out the algorithm. That'd be a great help. Alright, allow me to introduce you to these two YouTubers you probably already know. You clicked on the thumbnail because of them. Icy Mike is the man behind YouTube channel Hard2Hurt and the owner of training center RKM. Hard2Hurt is a channel taking a no-nonsense look at self-defense and fitness. It's a pretty viewer-friendly channel. The videos are fast-paced, Mike is a naturally funny guy, there are all kinds of shenanigans on there involving tasers and whips and other crazy stuff. Mike knows what he's doing and his Hard2Hurt brand is doing really well because of it. He's got a very solid subscriber base and draws big numbers on his videos. So I really like Mike, but it's not necessarily because of his videos about beating people in the head with flashlights or any of the other flashy stuff in his channel. Mike is a pretty unique cat and he's really good at what he does. Allow me to take a shot at explaining what makes him so good. So I started this channel Concrete Breakdowns because I had a hard time explaining the concepts I had in my head about fighting to my friends. Certain things are easy to cover, like who would win in a match between Stylebender and John Jones. That's just fun sports talk. If your friends follow some MMA, you're good. But when you want to dive into some deeper concepts, you run into some problems. You either sound like a preachy, pretentious, long-winded dickhead, or you compress what you're trying to say too much and now you're not getting across what you want. With this channel I have the right format and all these visual aids I can use to properly flesh out these concepts. And I still sometimes fail to find the right way to relate them to my audience. While Mike on the other hand just effortlessly summarizes an entire concept in 3 sentences, talking straight into the camera while he's putting on his gloves, even cracking some jokes while doing it. Mike trains competitive fighters, is a self-defense nut, and is a head trainer for people pretty much stepping off the couch at the same time. This allows Mike to understand what a certain footwork drill can mean for a professional fighter, while simultaneously understand what self-defense means for a 40-year-old lady living in a sketchy neighborhood. I'd say Mike's biggest strength is taking information from concepts that have a ton of intricacies and nuances, summarizing and communicating them in an entertaining way that literally anyone could benefit from. Mike might not be dropping studies on Dominic Cruz's footwork like BJJ Scout, but he can make Jim the mechanic understand why it's a good idea to work on his pummeling. And that's in many ways even more impressive.
Perfect!
So aside from having the best intro on martial arts YouTube, Seth Adams aka Sensei Seth is a 3rd degree karate black belt covering all things martial arts. His channel has tons of sparring videos, tier list of techniques and collabs with other martial arts YouTubers. I watch less of Seth's channel than I watch Hard2Hurt. I don't practice karate and therefore not all of his content is quite in my lane, but the videos that are in my lane I really enjoy. Seth has a wealth of information on kicking mechanics and he's not just a bare bones karate guy. Seth has taken deep dives into kickboxing and grappling to make his karate style viable. He's a guy who's definitely in the know when it comes to viable fighting and MMA, which in my opinion is the biggest strength of his channel. You see, there's a spectrum of people practicing karate. On the left side of the spectrum you have a person completely consumed by a karate McDojo lifestyle. A 17-year-old black belt in no contact karate who actually believes a year of flicking his feet up in the air in the mall has forced him into a competent fighter. And on the right side you have a high-level competitive MMA fighter who uses a ton of karate in his fight style. Now both of these extreme ends of the spectrum probably have little interest in Sensei Seth's channel. To the McDojo black belt, Seth's videos are a little too confronting with reality. It's probably not a lot of fun to see this guy, who is a lot better at karate than yourself, taking into account all the limitations of the style you've built your ego around. And the high-level competitive karate fighters are simply further along on the journey that Seth is on, so they probably have little to gain from watching. Stephen Wonderboy Thompson and Shinzo Machida probably aren't waiting on Sensei Seth's latest video to drop so they can add something new to their arsenal. They might like the Cobra Kai reviews though. So the very ends of the spectrum aren't Seth's target audience, but everyone in between can greatly benefit from checking out his channel. Seth might put effort into making his vids as YouTube friendly as possible, but there's a strong core of valuable information in all of them. Seth is actually on a journey testing his style against other styles, improving gradually, and we're all along for the ride. If you're somewhere in the middle of the spectrum I mentioned, and you're trying to inch towards the right, Seth's channel is definitely a gem. These two YouTubers frequently pop up on each other's channels and have a certain type of friendship going. So they might be good buddies under normal circumstances, but today they will face each other in So this is a pretty simple concept. We're setting up a fictional fight between Icy Mike and Sensei Seth and look at their attributes and fight style to make a determination who's more likely to win. The idea is that these guys are transported to Outworld and forced into a 1v1 deathmatch by Shao Kahn. No gloves, no rounds, no rules, fight till the end. Now this is obviously all just for fun, so allow your imagination to run wild a little. The easy way to break down this match would be to frame Mike as this small kickboxer and Seth as a big karateka, and go from there. But that wouldn't do them justice, as both guys have a lot more to offer than just those labels. Let's go over some tape and dive into what makes these guys who they are as fighters. Icy Mike has had his fair share of fights on camera, and there's enough footage to delve into to see what this guy likes to do in a fight. Mike is definitely not the biggest guy either. I couldn't find his height and weight anywhere, but I'm guessing around 5'8", 150 pounds, something like that. But Mike is quite used to fighting and sparring bigger guys over the years, and has a style that puts him in a good position to do so. Mike is a striking focused pressure fighter who emphasizes on clinch fighting and dirty boxing. One of his favorite shots is a big left hook to the body. He likes to load up on his left hook and let it rip. Mike is often seen slipping and rolling into range, and has a solid emphasis on body shots. Mike uses the reactions to his big power shots to either improve his striking position or position himself in a clinch. Mike has a deep bag of tricks, entering, exiting and within the clinch. He has a ton of shots he likes to throw off of cross phases and single collar ties. Mike implements a ton of unique shots in general, like for example his hammer fist to the body. A giant strength of Mike is his composure. Composure happens to be one of these concepts that Mike would explain on the spot within a sentence or two, but it's basically your ability to stay composed within the high stress situations of a fight. Your ability to not get rattled. Composure allows you to control your breathing, which in turn conserves your gas tank. And also allows you to remain in structurally sound positions while opponents attack you. Composure is one of these things you build up over many years of sparring. It allows Mike to have a certain stoic, unbreakable energy during exchanges, and remain defensively sound while slipping into striking range. By the way, for a guy who is not that high on kicking in his videos, Mike is a very active and capable kicker. In all of his fights, positionally improving footwork and leg kicks are a returning staple of Mike's game on the outside. The distance closing striking, the clinch entries, the mid-range composure and his outside game all work in conjunction. Mike can become this durable cockroach that's camping out right in front of your face, tagging you at will if you let him. And you'll be waiting for a long time if you're waiting on a break to gather your wits. These big guys at Street Beefs all run into the same problem with Mike in the stand-up. Mike's footwork and kicking game is tight enough to chew these guys up from the outside. Opponents naturally start gravitating towards the clinch where they can impose their size advantage. But Mike is actually right in his wheelhouse in the clinch and creates his best opportunities to do damage from there. You're damned if you do, damned if you don't. His mid-range game allows Mike to go from the outside to the inside, but it's also a way to tap an opponent's battery dry. Mike is for sure looking for his own shots in the mid-range, but he's fine with just being up in your grill, forcing you to exert energy. He's mobile and elusive from the outside, draining and defensively sound from the mid-range, mean and tricky from the inside. So now there's only one place left to go for opponents, but we'll touch on Mike's grappling later on in the video. Let's move towards Seth's game. Seth is basically a big old Kempo karate dude, but at the same time there's a lot more to him as a fighter. Like I mentioned before, Seth is actually cross-trained in kickboxing, Muay Thai, BJJ and boxing, and understands what a viable fight style is and strives to be a complete fighter. Seth does not have the same type of competitive fighting background as Mike, so we'll have to dive into his sparring footage here. Seth has a very kick-centric style and his excellent dexterity with his legs allow him a great range of kicking techniques, from tornado kicks to axe kicks. Seth has great flexibility and a real easy time getting his lead leg to his opponent's head. Seth's left high kick is definitely one of his bread and butter kicks, throwing it from either orthodox or southpaw. As for punches, Seth loves to bounce back right straight, giving away distance, baiting the opponent to step forward and intercepting them with the straight. There's a duality to Seth's fighting game. He's kind of a walking contradiction. Seth has named landing a head kick on an opponent a chubby surprise. As in, wow, I did not expect to get kicked in the head by this big dude. But there's a little more to that than just a memeish thing to say. On the one hand, he's this light on the feet, in and out, flexible karate dude. And on the other hand, he's this 6'1", 240 pound former football player. And while it's obvious how these things contrast, it might not be so obvious what this contrast creates. You see, there are many ways one could devise a game plan against a mobile, wide stance, kick-heavy fighter. Targeting the lead leg of the wide stance to bring down the mobility, be defensively tight and force your way inside after absorbing a blow, catching a kick, work for a takedown, cornering the mobile fighter with a steady pressure and cage cutting. But all these strategies have a checkmate scenario in mind that is supposed to use the opponent's mobility and nimbleness against them. You can be sturdy by being rooted to the ground and have that bouncy mobility at the same time after all. It's thoughts like, once he's cornered it'll be checkmate, once I'm on top of him it'll be checkmate, that make up these anti-karate game plans. But Seth's physical attributes are going to throw a big wrench in these plans. To a novice to intermediate, average sized grappler, there's no double-legging a guy like Seth. You might as well take down a fire hydrant. The premise of these anti-karate game plans is usually that while the karateka is fast, mobile and nimble, that same nimbleness comes with a certain fragility and a weakness to physical pressure and grappling. All these game plans will be a lot less effective against a thickly built former football player of a man who has a degree of competency with inside fighting and grappling. It's nice that you've devised this leg kick heavy game plan, but when this guy's legs are twice the size of yours and the guy has put in his kickboxing conditioning rounds, your advantage taking this route isn't going to be quite what you've imagined. Seth is in a great spot for using his style of karate, where he still has his bounce laid into his sparring rounds, but is not physically weak or fragile by any means. There are plenty of big sturdy heavyweights into karate, but many of them cannot maintain the mobility required to have distance control and make the most out of their style of choice. Seth is basically getting the best of both worlds. He has the range control, diverse striking and mobility from his karate background, while covering a lot of his exploitable habits with his cross training and physical attributes. Alright, so let's get into some matchup specifics on this deathmatch between Mike and Seth. Not even sure if I have to mention this, but anyone who tells you they can make fight predictions with any certainty is a straight up bullshit artist. Even making predictions on fights of professional fighters who fight in the same division and have tons of tape to study is nothing more than a somewhat educated guess. Predicting how a fight would go between these guys is just a fun thing to imagine, and can't actually be done to any serious degree on the basis of the sparring footage that's out there. I picked 4 subcategories our fighters can score points in. Our first category we'll go over is lethality. This is a category that could be confused with power, but there's a difference. Power is basically how much force you can generate. Lethality will be who has the most consequential weapon in the fight, who out of these two guys has the most potential to end the fight in quick fashion. Now we've gone over Mike's style, and Mike isn't necessarily a swarming volume striker. He sure likes his power shots and has been shown to be able to generate quite some force in his fights. But the most devastating weapon in his fight should be no other than Sensei Seth's head kick. Not only is Mike's head extremely easy to reach for Seth because of the height differential, there's also the weight discrepancy to consider. Going chin to shin with a leg that size can basically shut anyone's lights out. This point goes to the head kicks and counter shots of Seth. Next up is mindset. Whose mind is best suited for a fight to the death? Well, this one is relatively easy. Sensei Seth is one of these guys that would hold the door open for you while you're still half a block away, while Icy Mike is the kind of guy who shoots his wife in the head for fun. Mike has had more competition experience, used to be a bouncer as well as a police officer. When Shao Kahn, Mike is probably going to deal with adrenaline surge better than Seth. Now both these guys have sparred each other before, but who is going to benefit the most from the knowledge they have gained of each other before the fight? Karatekas benefit a lot from the fact there's not a ton of karate based fighters worth assault in MMA and kickboxing gyms. You might remember the Machida era, where Lyoto Machida was considered this unsolvable puzzle on account of his fight style. No one had sparring partners quite like Machida, so other fighters had basically one shot to get a feel for this guy during the fight itself. This is still true for karatekas to a certain extent, and especially for our favorite bottle kicking YouTuber dishing out chubby surprises. It would be really easy to imagine, let's say, a bar fight scenario where a dude gets completely blindsided by a head kick from Seth. But Mike is very familiar with the strengths and weaknesses of karate in general and of Seth specifically. Mike's also a capable kicker himself and understands a lot of the mechanics behind Seth's offense. Mike's own style is a lot more pressure based and is less tricky in that sense, and therefore less dependent on the element of surprise. A chubby surprise isn't all that without the surprise part. This point goes to Mike. Alright, so Mike's grappling is kind of a thing, and there's a reason I made this the last point on the list to cover. Mike is actually a relatively competent grappler and has successfully competed in blue belt grappling competitions. Mike is big into lifting and fitness, he's a strong guy, especially for his size. Mike's wrestling and top game is pretty darn good, and that bag of tricks he has in the clinch definitely translates to his ground and pound. That said, Mike's been taken down and controlled a bunch in his street beef fights, and hasn't managed to get much going from his back. He has enough capability to keep himself safe, but did not manage to get offense going from his guard. Seth and Mike actually had a grappling match, and the same thing was reflected in the match. A fresh Mike is a handful in the wrestling exchanges. But when Seth got on top, the weight really got to Mike, left him without options and drained his energy. Seth eventually moved to a high mount where he basically could do whatever he wanted, leaving Mike a deflated pancake after the match. This one goes to Seth. So after going over all of the facets of this fight, the one and only true winner is... Sensei Seth! Yeah, surprise guys. The guy with the 70 pounds plus weight advantage won the fight. That said, Mike has done pretty well against big guys before, so I'll go into my reasoning here. I actually see this fight play out like a low budget version of Israel Adesanya vs Jan Blachowicz at UFC 259. In this fight, the middleweight champion challenged the light heavyweight champion. Both guys had success and struggles with their respective striking styles, and were having a pretty competitive fight. Adesanya's takedown defense is solid and kept Jan off him while he was fresh, but as we got deeper and deeper into the championship rounds and fatigue set in, the takedown attempts, masked behind the competitive striking match, eventually grounded Adesanya. Jan keeping Adesanya pinned to the ground with a weight advantage, as well as arguably a grappling advantage in general, which won him the fight. Now, Seth and Mike are obviously not on the level of UFC champions, and also have very different styles than these fighters, but I see Mike playing the role of Adesanya in this fight, with Seth being Jan. The striking will be competitive. Mike will probably get inside a few times and draw blood from Seth, especially without gloves, he's gonna cut up Seth. But he won't truly do serious fight altering damage to Seth despite his connections. Seth is adept and frankly large enough in the clinch not to get his posture broken too bad by Mike, so he'll be able to avoid the worst of the damage there. And in turn, Seth will probably land infrequently on Mike because of the latter's familiarity with his style and general defensive composure. But Seth will definitely be dangerous when he does land, so neither party will be able to do a lot of sustained damage on each other on the feet. I envision somewhat of a competitive stalemate in the striking department. But just like the Stylebender Yen fight, there's one thing that will edge the stalemate definitively towards one side, and that's the grappling. Mike cannot get on top of Seth and keep him there. Seth can keep Mike pinned. As you can see in their grappling match, there's certainly a strength differential. Seth has the strength to gift wrap Mike and also move Mike's legs around with his arms. It's obvious that grappling with the size of Seth was very draining on Mike's energy systems. I don't see Mike sweeping Seth when he's really forcing his weight down and going over the footage. I also don't see Mike getting a submission off his back. Mike's attacks from his back just simply aren't at the level required to catch Seth. So basically I see a relatively competitive striking match eventually through stamina depletion turn into a not so competitive grappling match. Seth eventually mounting Mike and totally depleting him through grappling pressure and ground and pound. As this is a fight to the death, I see this going on until Mike is too drained to defend himself at all and Seth just basically stomping him out. No need to get too graphic here. This was Concrete Breakdowns. Drop who you think who would win this deathmatch in the comment section. If you want to see other deathmatches, let me know. I'm definitely open for input. If you want to see more unique breakdown content, subscribe to the channel. Peace!